Hello, good evening. This is the 11th episode of the Mobuku Chronicles, and it is Saturday, January the 14th, in the year 2012 AD. Okay, so to start with, I want to just do one thing that I keep forgetting to do, which is that I think it was in episode 8, I mentioned that, or maybe it was episode 7, that I mentioned that the ancients valued gold at 480 grains of wheat, and what I meant to say, or to clarify tonight, or I mean to clarify tonight, is that it was 480 grains of wheat is valued at 1 ounce of gold. In other words, gold was valued in terms of wheat, and that is a very significant insight, which I will probably touch upon again later on. Now, last time I finished up last time talking about the Federal Reserve and the description that I gave of the Federal Reserve is that it is a criminal institution, a private corporation, and it is unconstitutional and therefore treasonous, and I talked about the fractional reserve banking system, that is the Federal Reserve System, and how that artificially inflates the money supply by putting bogus money, or shall we say what I would call vapor money into circulation, and this money is worthless. Now, to follow up on the Federal Reserve, because there's really not much more to be said about it, except that the following item came up recently. It actually happened, I guess it was summer last year, but new information came to light, at least came to light for me, and I want to relay that to you. And this has happened as follows. It's regarding a company called Tropos, an American company, which is, I did research on them a couple of days ago. And Tropos is a Wi-Fi broadband company that produces broadband equipment that they sell to, and no doubt service for cities and towns. So it's a pretty large broadband operation that they have. Now, this particular, what I'm going to read now, comes from a blog I frequent every day, well, five days a week, by the name of HarveyOrgan.blogspot.com. Harvey Organ is a very interesting person, and he has a lot of interesting information about the gold and silver market, and he posts something at the close of every single trading day, Monday through Friday, except that the Friday night one he doesn't put up until Saturday. Now, this is what he says here. This unresolved matter regarding Tropos was a major underlying current that influenced the agreement which was recently made to directly trade currencies between China and Japan, bypassing the United States dollar. You may recall that Tropos was the intended recipient of 700 billion US dollars transmitted by a valid ACATS, which is a wire transfer system in the banking system, from the Bank of Taiwan, but the funds were hijacked by the Federal Reserve, and to this day the money is still retained under the control of the Federal Reserve. In other words, the Federal Reserve stole this money. So in addition to being a perpetrator of a massively monstrous scam on the rest of the world, the Federal Reserve is also a thief. Tropos pursuant to the tenets of maritime law, which is the legal system by which matters relating to international currencies are adjudicated. As part of this process, Tropos has written extensively to the Bank of International Settlements, and the Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of all central banks, and it's located in Basel, Switzerland, and is completely and utterly opaque. And furthermore, anybody who works for them is granted diplomatic immunity and cannot be searched or questioned when conducting business on behalf of the Bank of International Settlements. And it has a very murky past, to say the least. And in addition to them, President Obama, various agencies in the U.S. government, as well as the G20 countries, and various global leaders detailing the behavior of the Federal Reserve. Many of these letters are posted in previous blog reports that Harvey Organ put up last summer. In one of the Tropos letters, it was said, "This bold disregard for lawful transfer through the rogue actions of the steward of the reserve currency of the world is an affront to all global participants. We believe this is a watershed moment that will define the moral position of world participants in the international banking system for some time to come, both amongst developing and established countries." Tropos went on to say, "If the Federal Reserve can so act without consequence or redress, the international banking system loses the confidence of its constituency and becomes unable to operate, effectively losing public trust in the private scrip." In other words, they call a dollar, the Federal Reserve note, a private scrip, as the world's reserve currency. This has impact on all nations, which must currently use Federal Reserve notes, private scrip. This action by the Federal Reserve is destabilizing global trade, creating chaos and uncertainty in financial matters, and requires the focused attention of leaders in the global community. Well, the fact of the matter is we don't have any leaders. Not what you would call leaders. At least I wouldn't call them leaders. Not even remotely. Tropos has widely dispersed the letters to the G20, NATO, the BRIC countries, and others. Both China and Japan listened and took action. Meaning they took action to bypass the US dollar in trade between those two countries, which are, I believe, the third and fourth largest economies in the world. The fallout of allowing this disregard for lawful transfer is now being played out as countries choose to bypass the United States dollar in trade arrangements. It goes without saying that China and Japan represent a significant part of world trade. The impact of this currency arrangement between China and Japan will serve to lower the velocity of the US dollar in circulation, since the two countries will not be using the US dollar. This effectively will weaken the dollar as demand for the United States dollar shrinks. This will be felt this year. As countries successfully trade among themselves without the US dollar, the status of the US dollar as a reserve currency suffers as a result. One wonders how long the Tropos affair will go unresolved, and what costs to the status of the USD, that is the US dollar, as a global reserve currency before it is resolved. Not to mention the status of the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury, which works hand in glove with the Federal Reserve. Clearly, global trading nations have taken note and are making their views known by bypassing the Federal Reserve and the use of the US dollar. No doubt there are more nations to follow, especially in Asia. It is no longer just a money question. it has become a geopolitical nightmare that has far-reaching consequences for the United States and the Federal Reserve and the citizens who must use the weakened U.S. dollar. Okay, so that's the Tropos affair. And pretty much that sums up what I have to say about the Federal Reserve. And I don't need to talk about that particular institution. Now, the next thing on my agenda tonight is the major market in the world by far is the bond market. It's at least 10 times the U.S. Treasury market is at least 10 times the size of the stock market, and it's basically the central pillar, so to speak, of the entire global hegemony of the U.S. dollar. Now, the fact of the matter is that the bond market is being propped up by the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury because the evidence is pouring in that the foreign investors are starting to sell the U.S. bonds. Now, what the problem is here is that we have a debt in the United States that just recently exceeded the gross national product of the United States, the gross domestic product. So this debt can never be paid off. However, since the bond market is of such strategic importance for the federal government to try to maintain its status as the pillar of the world community, which is fast fading, what will happen, and this is a forewarning, is that they will, that is Congress, who is in the back pockets of all these criminal bankers, they're paid off and bought and so forth and so on. They do exactly what they're told in terms of passing legislation. That they will pass legislation that will mandate that anybody who holds a 401k or an IRA or CDs in the bank, is that those will be, for all intents and purposes, stolen. Now, it won't be overt like that. What will exactly happen is that the legislation will be passed that will mandate that every single dollar in every single IRA and 401k and locked up in bank CDs will, by law, have to be converted to the purchase of U.S. treasuries. That is what is going to happen. That is a virtual certainty. In fact, it is a certainty. I guarantee it. I mean, that's why I closed down our IRA. When did we do that? I think it was it was 2009. And we paid whatever we paid. We didn't have to pay any penalties because we were, we qualified in terms of our age not to have to pay penalties, but we did pay out the taxes on it, and we just got it out of there. So, and I highly recommend you do the same thing. And as far as 401ks go, I don't think you can possibly do that, but what you can do, and this was suggested by Jim Willie, who I've mentioned before, and it's a pretty good strategy. You borrow against your 401k, and you take that borrowed money and you